On a sweltering summer day, the ear-splitting wail of sirens sliced through the air, halting neighborhood activities mid-action. People stopped in their tracks, hot dogs poised halfway to mouths, while children suspended their cannonball dives and music abruptly ceased. All eyes turned to the street where two police cars approached with the urgency expected of a significant police operation. My water gun slipped from my grip, heart racing, not out of fear but at the sheer hilarity of the situation. Karen stood triumphantly on the pavement, arms folded like a cartoon villain, confident she'd summoned authorities. But when the officer stepped out and surveyed the scene, he exclaimed, "Is that DJ Ricky? I love this chap, mind if we join?" The music resumed with vigor as Karen's expression dropped in astonishment. That day my modest pool bash turned into something memorable. A few weeks prior, I'd set out to throw a summer gathering that went beyond your typical backyard affair. It morphed into a vibrant pool party with foam machines, floating disco balls, and a DJ booth balanced on a massive inflatable flamingo. Neon lights danced across the water's surface, and the grill offered a spread that would rival any food festival. Every family in our vicinity received an invite, from the Bennetts with their quartet of pool-loving offspring to elderly Mr. Robbins, eager to showcase his flamingo swim trunks. Enthusiasm spread among the invitees, except Karen. You know her type, perennially trimmed bob, oversized sunglasses perched above the bridge of her nose, with a clipboard seemingly fused to her hand. Heading the HOA, she managed our community with the precision of royalty over Buckingham Palace. Rules were her forte: no lawn decor, basketball hoops nor garage doors open past 8 minutes. Hence, as the monumental water slide inflated within my garden and the DJ prepared by the poolside snack shack, Karen predictably grew incensed. She glared from her windows as we organized the occasion. I initially presumed she was simply curious, but her expression contorted into what can only be described as ire fueled by others' enjoyment. Her furious strides brought her over, her beloved HOA handbook clutched like scripture. "This is a residential area, not a public splash park," she retorted, her tension palpable. I smoothly offered the city permit I'd secured weeks earlier. Everything from the sound levels to the gathering size was perfectly authorized, even arranging extra off-site parking. "It's all legal," I reassured her, extending an offer to join in, complete with popsicle bribes. Karen's eye twitched. "This isn't over," she muttered, retreating dramatically into the sanctuary of her rose bushes, plotting impending countermeasures. Although I'd hoped that concluded matters, Karen was relentless. Logic was merely advisory to her determined drive. An hour into the lively event, children splashed about as adults leisurely reclined on novelty floats, tacos and unicorns among them. DJ Ricky dropped infectious beats amidst fog machine bursts and Cousin Omar expertly flipped burgers. The local ice cream vendor, seeing an opportunity, stationed nearby to dispense free treats to wristband-clad attendees. Laughter erupted, dancing ensued, and for the first time in a while, the neighborhood truly felt alive. Then came the sirens. As the police vehicles arrived, there was an inevitable dip in the atmosphere. Parents summoned children from the pool, music stopped, and DJ Ricky briefly ceased his set. Karen stood poised, gesturing towards my house as though enacting a courtroom scene. It wasn't enough for her to halt festivities, she sought punitive action. 2 officers emerged, one imposing, capable of hefting patrol cars, the other younger, scanning the celebratory surroundings with slight bafflement. Foam drifted amiably, laughter hung awkwardly in the stillness. Received a report of a wild disturbance, suspected illicit happenings, overcrowding, noise disruptions, public imbibement, the burly officer noted from his pad. I stepped forward, steady but assertive, clarifying the legality of the event. No alcohol, no illicit substances, just good old-fashioned fun. Karen interjected passionately, accusing the scene of chaos, with children acting unruly, foam rampant, and music was deafening. Then the younger officer peered towards the pool. "Is that DJ Ricky?" The scene was set with my nephew, a child waving cheerfully from a donut-shaped float, recounting tales of a vibrant party. An older police officer blinked and chuckled, comparing the event favorably to some of the barbecues he'd attended. Karen attempted to escalate the situation, declaring the gathering chaotic and demanding it be shut down. The officer, taking a step back, surveyed the scene and smirked, inquiring about the leftover burgers. Omar, keen to keep the mood buoyant, announced that a fresh batch was ready. The officer, exchanging glances with his partner and myself, decided to let the celebration proceed, albeit with a request to lower the music after 10 o'clock. The crowd responded with cheers, DJ Ricky spun the turntable victoriously, and children plunged back into the pool. Karen, embarrassed and infuriated, retreated to her home with such force that her decorative wreath fell from the door. Surprisingly, the officers remained. They enjoyed burgers, removed their gear jackets, and embraced the festivity. One even joined the children's cannonball contests, much to the delight of everyone else, while Karen, stewing in frustration, peeked through her blinds and witnessed the officers she called on enjoying the pool party she sought to dismantle. This was the day the Homeowners Association (HOA) realized not all complaints are victorious, and the pool party etched itself into neighborhood lore. The following morning greeted me with the sound of fluttering paper. Opening my door, I discovered 3 vibrant orange flyers plastered across my fence, mailbox, and even atop my lawn flamingo. They announced an obligatory emergency HOA meeting, promising immediate enforcement of new community regulations. Karen, in her characteristically precise handwriting, had scrawled, "This neighborhood is not a circus." Her intent was clear. She was launching a full-scale retaliatory campaign after her humiliation in front of neighbors and the police. Curiosity guided me to the emergency HOA meeting that afternoon, held at the community center. The turnout was substantial, filled with partygoers possibly motivated by guilt or fear. Karen presided like a monarch, flanked by 2 board members, Nancy, who appeared uneasy, and Gary, barely awake. With a sweet but venomous tone, Karen unfolded a dramatic speech lamenting the neighborhood's perceived descent into chaos, ostensibly jeopardizing property values and disrupting suburban harmony. She unfurled a list of emergency amendments to the HOA rules, so extreme they bordered on farce. No amplified outdoor music, pool parties capped at 10 attendees, no foam or water slides, with all pool activity concluding before 5 p.m. External guests required board approval. I raised a question, curious about the origins of these rules, to which Karen replied they were drafted through emergency executive powers, despite their absence in the bylaws. As murmurs spread, neighbors flipped through the documents Karen distributed, some whispering in disbelief. Amid increasing discontent, Karen forged ahead, stating violations would incur fines and possible suspension of HOA privileges. A mother stood, questioning the fate of her child's birthday pool party, to which Karen responded coldly, board review was necessary, with a written application 2 weeks in advance. Another parent queried about barbecue music. Karen dismissed the notion, citing noise violations. The room's atmosphere shifted from confusion to anger as the rule's implications hit home. Karen's biggest blunder was attempting an immediate vote for the amendments with board members Nancy and Gary. Gary, barely alert, nodded yes before fully comprehending the situation. Nancy hesitated, visibly uncomfortable, but ultimately succumbed to Karen's intimidating gaze, raising her hand to approve. With 3 out of 5 votes, the new rules passed. As the meeting concluded, attendees departed in stunned silence, contemplating the settled authority over their summer plans. It seemed as though the burgeoning social event had been quashed by some sort of edict. Karen stood outside, clutching her clipboard with an air of smug triumph. I refrained from speaking, choosing instead to walk past her, my mind churning with thoughts. She was gearing up for a battle, and that was fine by me. However, I had no intention of engaging in shouting matches. My approach would be strategic, fact-driven, and inventive, with just the right sprinkle of unpredictability to keep things lively. Once home, I delved into my filing cabinet. Beneath stacks of old tax forms and repair invoices lay a manila envelope marked with property deed and original land record. Heart-pounding, I retrieved it. My home was one of the oldest in the locale, established long before the Homeowners Association (HOA) existed and before the first model homes materialized. A memory of my father's words came to mind: "We were here before all this HOA nonsense." I scanned the contents and, as expected, my property, pool and driveway included, was registered well before the HOA came into being. This revelation could only mean one thing: their regulations did not pertain to me, as I had not opted in voluntarily. In fact, there was an exemption signed by my father when the HOA was formed, asserting our refusal of membership. The following day, I prepared 10 certified copies of the documents and dispatched one to each HOA board member via registered mail. There were no threats, no counterarguments, just plain facts. The cover letter succinctly stated, "For your legal records, HOA jurisdiction does not apply to my property. All current and future attempts to enforce HOA rules on this residence will be met with formal legal challenge. Thank you." While assertive, I was far from finished. Karen's attempt to thwart our festive summer plans would be bested by my own. I embarked on organizing an even larger event than before. This wouldn't just be a party, it would be a proclamation of liberation, aptly dubbed the Second Splash. The guest list expanded to twice its original size. Bubble machines replaced the foam cannons, and I added underwater lights to the pool that synchronized with the music. A projector paired with a giant inflatable screen set the scene for an evening movie float. The crown jewel of my preparations was hiring a lawyer to stand by with all necessary permits, documents, and exemption notices in case Karen made another unwelcome move. As word spread, neighbors who hadn't previously attended showed interest, and even residents from nearby streets reached out via Facebook, asking if their children could join. My response was welcoming. Of course, no HOA approval needed on my land. Karen was about to discern the distinction between control and true influence. She might have climbed her way to temporary authority, but she was about to find out that power rooted in fear dissolves swiftly once intimidation loses its grip. By the time Saturday arrived, anticipation crackled through the neighborhood. Children eagerly counted down the minutes, parents settled into lawn chairs, coolers in tow, and cars lined the street in an organized fashion. This was no longer just a gathering, it was a festive protest of sorts, with pool floats as the chosen vessel. Karen remained conspicuously absent from the scene. Her windows were shut tight, blinds drawn, and the usually prominent HOA flags were noticeably absent from her property, as if bracing for an impending storm. In a sense she was, but one that arrived laden with slip slides and an abundant taco bar. Surveying the backyard, I found the bubble machines already in full swing, casting sparkling orbs into the air. The inflatable screen stood proudly, projector ready for the nighttime screening. DJ Ricky was back, this time equipped with a waterproof setup and customized mixes crafted for optimal splash. My cousin Omar expanded our grill stations and even roped in a couple of friends to serve, ensuring he too enjoyed the festivities. It was all falling into place beautifully, yet I anticipated Karen wouldn't allow the event to proceed undisturbed. True to form, just as the first burst of music resonated and the children splashed into the pool, a white SUV parked across the street. Out stepped a man in a buttoned-up shirt, clipboard in hand, and a badge secured on his belt. The chatter among the guests paused momentarily, some parents exchanging anxious glances. I intercepted the man before anyone else, greeting him casually. "Hello, how may I assist you?" I produced my ID as the city zoning inspector arrived, responding to a complaint about an unlicensed public event with potential code infringements. There was mention of a temporary water feature being erected without permits. Ready for this moment, I handed him a comprehensive folder. It contained all the necessary permits, not only for the event but also for temporary structures, electrical safety, noise regulations, and food service compliance. Each document bore official stamps of approval. Furthermore, I included a land deed proving my exemption from the HOA's jurisdiction. The inspector meticulously examined the documents, his face not revealing any thoughts. He then surveyed the scene, noting the organized parking, labeled waste bins, cheerful and sober attendees, and prominent safety instructions by the pool. After a moment, he exhaled a low whistle. "I've never seen anyone be this thorough," he remarked. "Everything seems in order. I'll report this as a non-issue." Before he left, I offered him a root beer and a plate brimming with nachos. He chuckled. "I might come back later, off duty of course." As he departed, I noticed a movement by Karen's window. Her curtain twitched as she quickly stepped out of view. I could almost hear her frustration from across the street. But she wasn't finished. An hour later, as the music played and the pool party was in full swing, two strangers appeared, clad in polo shirts emblazoned with a private security logo. They approached with an air of authority typical of those expecting to shut down an event. "We've been retained by the HOA to ensure perimeter safety," one announced. "There's a concern about crowd control and unauthorized entries. We plan to install a temporary access gate." "You're on my property line," I replied calmly, gesturing towards the legal boundary markers. "You have no authority here. I didn't hire you and I don't want a fence. This is private land. If you step onto it, you are trespassing." They dismissed my words and began laying out caution tape and metal fencing. I was already documenting the scene, narrating each of their actions on my phone. I contacted my lawyer, who swiftly sent a formal trespass warning to the security firm's headquarters. Once received, the guards received orders to vacate immediately or face legal repercussions. They left, grumbling, greeted by cheers from the crowd as the music returned to full blast. The remainder of the gathering unfolded seamlessly. Lights colored the water as teenagers played pool volleyball and adults enjoyed snow cones and mojitos. Even the mayor's assistant dropped by after hearing about the event online, snapping photos for the city's community engagement newsletter. The atmosphere was one of pure joy, not just a pool party but a triumphant stand against local oppression. As dusk settled, an inflatable screen lit up, and a movie began playing. Families floated on giant inflatable pizzas as bubbles wafted through the air, laughter resounding down the street. I relaxed in a deck chair, lemonade in hand, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Officer Brooks stood there, out of uniform, smiling as he handed me a police department challenge coin. "For hosting the safest, cleanest, most enjoyable pool party in the city," he said. "Also, my daughter made me promise to ask if she could come to the next one." "You're both invited," I said without skipping a beat. "We'll have a VIP float ready for you." Across the street, Karen stood on her porch in total darkness, no longer hiding, merely watching, defeated. I knew her scheming wasn't finished, but for now she had been thwarted. Her attempts to disrupt, the emergency rules, false allegations, hired security, had all crumbled against preparation and community support. What she intended as a battleground became a beacon of camaraderie and celebration. The morning after the festivities, I discovered a flyer taped to my door, its edges damp from the sprinklers. The words shouted accusations in bold font, "Community safety at risk," followed by a lengthy tirade, blaming me for disturbing the peace, lowering property values, and drawing strangers in. She seemed obsessed with foaming incidents, urgently requesting a review of leadership, a laughable demand from someone who'd stirred up rebellion. Her signing as acting HOA Supreme Coordinator was the cherry on top, since the title was fictitious. Knowing her antics, I chuckled but understood she'd soon strike again. Previously, she'd enlisted city inspectors and security. Now she planned to rally other residents. That very afternoon, she toured homes like a campaigner before Election Day, distributing homemade brochures captured from her upstairs window. These grainy leaflets were filled with scenes from my party, guests laughing, swimming, or enjoying nachos. In one, a child danced amidst foam. Karen claimed these illustrated chaos and moral decay. Some neighbors gave her polite nods, others shut doors midway through her speech. Yet a few, albeit very few, seemed swayed by her propaganda. I began noticing wary glances from homes uninvolved in my events. Spreading such doubts was risky amid our current momentum. So I strategized. I went grander. My flyers were clean, professional, and appealing. Community Float Fest, they announced, detailing activities like family trivia, pool karaoke, a create-your-own Sunday bar, and even a charity box for the local animal shelter. It was an open invitation for all to relax, reconnect, and revel. No politics, no power struggles, just joy and human connection. I distributed them personally, smiling, never needing explanation. The word had already spread. While Karen tried to splinter the community with fear, I offered fun, and people were famished for it. Nonetheless, Karen escalated unexpectedly. The day before my third party, a local news van rolled into the neighborhood. A reporter emerged with a camera crew interviewing residents. Karen had involved the media, portraying our once serene area as a pool-based disturbance overseen by a party autocrat, even alleging I hosted illegal commercial events. When the reporter arrived at my home, I greeted them with my comprehensive folder, the very one shown to the zoning inspector. Permits, deed exemptions, the whole works. I invited them to witness our party preparations firsthand. Much to my surprise, the reporter was affable and genuinely admired what I was doing. They recorded the setup, interviewed previous guests, and captured charming clips of children practicing cannonballs. One mother became emotional on camera, sharing how disconnected the neighborhood had felt before, and how her children finally made friends. By the end of the segment, it showed me by the pool, waving as if I were running for office. The piece aired that night under the title, HOA Havoc or Community Hero. You decide. Spoiler alert, viewers made their decision and online reactions were splendid. Karen likely fumed over the broadcast. By morning, she distributed a full-color newsletter brimming with dramatic red fonts and arrows highlighting screenshots from the report. Her allegations grew wilder. Noise terrorism, community poisoning, and even something about musical mind control. She placed these newsletters in every mailbox herself, likely working through the night to ensure dawn delivery. But now her desperation was apparent. People texted me photos of her newsletter paired with laughing emojis. Someone even crafted a meme comparing Karen to a movie villain, posting it in the neighborhood's Facebook group where it gained significant traction locally. Yet she didn't relent. She filed another anonymous complaint, this time with the fire department, claiming there were electrical hazards and unsafe lighting setups. Right before the next event commenced, a fire crew arrived with sirens blazing. Karen watched, a hopeful glint in her eye. However, fate intervened. The fire captain recognized me immediately as he had been my swim team coach in school. I offered him a tour showcasing the top-notch wiring, the waterproof cables, all professionally installed. He chuckled, remarking, "Your wiring's safer than half the homes I've inspected this month." The punchline? He stayed for a burger, signed the fire safety compliance sheet, and let his team try the water slide before leaving. The entire neighborhood witnessed it. Karen's last attempt at emergency backfired spectacularly. By the time our event began that evening, the atmosphere was jubilant, steeped in community unity. Worked seamlessly, families mingled as strangers chatted like lifelong companions, and the charity box overflowed with donations for the shelter. Even the once skeptical neighbors who had shunned prior gatherings joined in, their children leading them with excitement. People arrived with their own pool chairs, setting up lawn games around the garden. At one moment, DJ Ricky played a slow number, prompting a dozen couples to dance in the shallow end of the pool beneath a canopy of string lights. The event had evolved into something beyond my initial expectations, a burgeoning neighborhood tradition. Throughout it all, Karen lingered in the shadows, her porch light flickering indecisively between storming out and conceding defeat. But it mattered little. Her warnings had become background noise, her newsletters disregarded, and her complaints now seemed almost comical. She had alienated every ally, with only silence remaining from her erstwhile supporters. The festivities wrapped up just before midnight, not by compulsion but by collective choice. People aided in tidying, children embraced goodbyes, and parents personally expressed gratitude. Mrs. Hill, an elderly neighbor who hadn't ventured from her home in months, approached with tears gleaming in her eyes. "You've revived this place," she softly remarked. With that, Karen's grip on the narrative faltered. She had misjudged the power of community, the strength found in joy, and the resolve of someone adept at adhering to rules whilst skillfully circumventing hers. A new chapter was about to unfold. 2 days post the Unity Float Fest, a notice appeared on the community board in shaky block letters. Emergency HOA leadership vote to take place this Friday. Below was a cryptic message. Following recent unrest and community division, a vote for interim leadership is scheduled. All residents urged to participate. Though unnamed, it was obvious. A desperate move by Karen to reclaim control amid her public missteps and failed strategies that had made her a local joke. Unbeknownst to her, the community had irrevocably shifted. Instead of wielding fear and control, I offered a reason to smile, and that transition could not be undone. Friday evening arrived and the community center quickly filled. Conversations flowed as people arrived, and children played on the nearby green. Previously absent families attended with determination. Karen sat at the front, clinging to her clipboard, her authority visibly waning. Her expression was strained, her usual smugness replaced by anxious calculation. Her two allies, Nancy and Gary, sat beside her, avoiding eye contact with attendees. Gary appeared sleep-deprived. Nancy tapped her pen nervously. The atmosphere was charged with an energy absent at the first emergency meeting. This time, attendees were there to make decisions, not simply comply. Karen delivered her opening remarks, familiar lines on repeat like a broken record. She claimed the parties were hazardous, that my events were chaotic, jeopardizing children, diluting community values. She even cited an incident involving a pool noodle as if it were a significant crime. She attempted to convey authority, but the ensuing silence spoke volumes. No applause. No nods. Some even rolled their eyes. Karen noticed. Her voice faltered as she moved towards the vote. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Darnell, a quietly spoken gentleman residing in the area for over 20 years with no history of speaking at meetings, steadily rose. "I'd like to nominate someone," he declared. Karen turned swiftly. "Nominations aren't open," she retorted. "This is a structured leadership continuity vote." Yet Darnell remained standing. He raised his voice slightly. "That's not how this works, Karen. It's a democratic vote. Anyone can be nominated." Murmurs filled the room. Karen attempted to object, but voices called out, "Let him speak," followed by, "Let him nominate." Karen surveyed the room, witnessing her control slipping once more. This time, no legal maneuver or emergency authority could rescue her. Darnell persisted, "I nominate S. Lopez, who has been a pillar of this community, raising 3 children here and orchestrating the Unity Float Fest as if it were a city-wide celebration. Applause erupted. Karen's expression froze. Sar stood, surprised and flustered. "I didn't intend to run for anything," she stated, but the room had already rallied behind her. "A person defined by creation rather than destruction was hailed. You maintained calm where Karen incited chaos," another remarked. The board had no choice but to add Sar's name to the ballot as Karen watched, dumbfounded. Voting commenced and papers were handed out. Some scribbled with Sharpies, others borrowed pens, or even scrawled on torn napkins. It took a mere 20 minutes to gather and tally the votes. When the results were announced, the room burst into life. Sar had won decisively, while Karen had fewer votes than Gary. Her jaw clenched as she rose, eyes glittering with unshed tears. Muttering under her breath, she stormed out, leaving her clipboard, a symbol of her rigid authority, abandoned on a chair. However, Karen's downfall wasn't just figurative. In the following days, the new board officially rescinded every ludicrous rule she'd enforced. The quiet pool policy was abolished, music and guest restrictions lifted, and most fines she had imposed were reviewed and overturned. Residents began expressing themselves freely, decorating their homes, playing music during barbecues, and organizing gatherings with newfound assurance. The community found its voice once more. One evening, as the sun was setting and I cleaned my pool skimmer, the sound of a moving truck echoed across the street. Workers were loading boxes from Karen's house, a sale sign firmly planted in her front lawn. She departed silently, without farewell, as quietly as she once ruled with uproar. Days later, the police officer who had attended both parties visited while on patrol. He presented a framed certificate labeled Neighborhood Heart Award, with a grin. "We conjured this up at the department," he chuckled, "but you deserve it." My pool, once merely a swimming spot, had transformed into a symbol, not just of joy but of liberation from control, where laughter triumphed over silence and neighbors became friends. To mark Karen's departure, the neighborhood held one final gathering, not from vengeance but relief, aptly named the Farewell Float. The event was neither wild nor noisy, just warm and heartfelt. Children painted farewell signs with sentiments like, "No more clipboards," and "Let the fun begin forever." T-shirts were even printed with a cartoon depiction of Karen's house enveloped by a massive foam wave. We laughed, danced, and shared stories. As I sat by the pool that night, lights shimmering on the water and laughter echoing softly, I realized something essential. The true victory lay not in parties or permits but in demonstrating that joy, when shared openly and respectfully, surpasses fear. One person's grasp for control pales against the strength of many who choose happiness. I gazed at the smiling faces around me and thought, this is how community should be, not ruled but lived in, not controlled but cared for. Should anyone attempt to reintroduce fear into our community, they'd have to contend with an inflatable legion of flamingos, a DJ who refused to quit, and a pool that had become a beacon of resistance, unity, and celebration. The pool wasn't just fun, it was untouchable. Karen's story was one she would never relive.